to be #1 in America. That was never Robert Smith's goal. In fact, he's openly said he hates death. He hates the idea of chasing fame, and he certainly hates the drama that erupts when the King of Goth crosses paths with his enemies. Today we're stepping into the shadowy world of Robert Smith's greatest musical rivalries. "I'm sure I'm hated for it most of the time," Smith once admitted, especially by record companies who could never understand why he wasn't desperate to sell more albums. But Robert Smith, the legendary frontman of The Cure, has always been more than just a man with wild, tangled hair and a smear of black lipstick. Behind the sad songs and gothic imagery lies a sharp-tongued artist known for some of the most bitter feuds in alternative music history. Smith transformed The Cure into one of the most influential bands of all time. But according to insiders, he was never shy about sharing brutally honest opinions about fellow musicians. Those unfiltered thoughts reportedly sparked rivalries that became the stuff of rock legend. From backstage confrontations to icy public insults, these clashes helped define the alternative scene for decades. Some of these disputes became so heated that entire festivals were forced to keep the bands apart. The music industry has whispered about these tensions for years, but today we're exposing the stories behind Robert Smith's most infamous enemies. And wait until you hear which massive band lands at #1. So, grab your black eyeliner and settle in. These weren't simple disagreements over musical style. These were personal vendettas that, according to many insiders, tore the alternative music world apart. Let's count down the bands Robert Smith allegedly despised the most. 6. Duran Duran Sliding. In at #6 is one of the most surprising rivalries of the 1980s. Robert Smith reportedly could not stand Duran. Duran, or anything they stood for, sources claim Smith believed Duran Duran were the complete opposite of what real music should be. While The Cure were crafting dark, emotionally rich masterpieces, Duran Duran were, in Smith's alleged words, churning out plastic pop for teenagers. The tension reportedly began in the early 1980s when both bands were rapidly rising to fame. Industry insiders recall Smith rolling his eyes whenever a Duran Duran song came on the radio. He supposedly told friends that their success was proof of how shallow the music business had become, and accused them of cheapening the authenticity of alternative music. The rivalry only deepened as both bands crossed paths at major festivals. Backstage staff say Smith avoided Duran entirely, refusing photographs, declining handshakes, and even leaving venues early if they were performing. The breaking point came when a journalist asked Smith about Duran Duran's influence on new wave music. According to sources, Smith's answer was brutal. He allegedly dismissed their hits as soulless garbage for people who don't understand real emotion. That hostility reportedly lasted throughout the entire decade, with Smith never softening his stance toward the new romantic superstars. 5. The Smithson. The #5 spot is a feud that supposedly split the entire alternative scene. Robert Smith versus Morrissey of the Smiths. Both singers were known for melancholy lyrics and gloomy soundscapes, but insiders say they saw each other as bitter rivals from the start. Critics constantly compared the two bands, and early reviews even referred to The Cure as the poor man's Smiths, a comparison that reportedly enraged Smith. He allegedly told friends that Morrissey was stealing The Cure's formula, but dressing it up with pretension. Smith supposedly believed the Smiths were receiving credit for ideas The Cure had pioneered. Things became personal, as both frontmen began lacing interviews with sly insults. Smith was rumored to have said, "Morrissey thinks he invented being sad," while Morrissey allegedly mocked The Cure's music as theatrical nonsense. Journalists reported that neither singer would grant interviews if the other band was mentioned. By the mid-1980s, when both groups were fighting for the same fan base, the feud reached a fever pitch. Backstage sources say the two demanded separate dressing rooms and refused to perform on the same stage schedule. Former band members have confirmed that the rivalry was real, bitter, and all-consuming, a cold war over who could be Britain's ultimate king of melancholy. 4. Susie and the Banshees. Number 4 is perhaps the most personal feud of them all. Robert Smith's falling out, with Susie and the Banshees cut especially. Deep because he had once played guitar for the band, the Lee. Drama began in 1979 when Smith temporarily joined the Banshees during a difficult period. He helped them record some of their most important early work, but according to insiders, Susie Sue treated him more like a hired session player than a creative partner, leaving Smith feeling disrespected and unappreciated. Things worsened after Smith left to refocus on the Cure. Susie allegedly gave interviews calling him unreliable and suggesting he wasn't capable of handling the demands of a real professional band. Smith never forgave those public slights. Throughout the 1980s, both camps allegedly fired barbed comments at each other. Smith reportedly downplayed Susie's influence on Gothic music, claiming she merely copied punk bands and added makeup, while Susie dismissed The Cure as amateur hour. Former bandmates have confirmed that this wasn't just business. It was a deeply personal betrayal that haunted Smith for years. 3. Joy Division, New Order. Coming in at number 3 is a rivalry that helped define an entire musical era. Robert Smith's long-standing tension with Joy Division, and later New Order, was fueled by fierce artistic competition. Both bands emerged from the late 1970s post-punk underground, crafting dark, atmospheric music at the same time. Insiders claim Smith saw Joy Division as The Cure's biggest threat and believed frontman Ian Curtis was copying his vocal style and emotional approach after Curtis's tragic death in 1980 and the formation of New Order. The rivalry shifted into the electronic realm. Smith reportedly bristled as New Order earned praise for their innovative dance music while The Cure were increasingly labeled. Old-fashioned sources say Smith would change the radio station whenever New Order played and refused to acknowledge their influence on alternative music. To him, Joy Division and New Order represented everything he disliked about the Manchester scene's attitude toward Southern bands like The Cure. 2. U2 weight number 2 is perhaps the most shocking feud in rock history. Robert Smith versus U2. According to insiders, Smith considered Bono and his bandmates the embodiment of everything wrong with modern music. While The Cure stayed true to their underground roots, U2 embraced massive stadium tours and corporate sponsorships. The friction reportedly began in the early 1980s as both bands climbed the charts. Smith supposedly despised Bono's grand political speeches during concerts, accusing U2 of using social causes to distract from what he saw as a lack of genuine artistic depth. As U2's shows grew more elaborate with giant video screens and elaborate stage sets, Smith reportedly scoffed that real musicians don't need flashing lights to connect with an audience. When U2 racked up multiple Grammy Awards, Smith allegedly told friends that awards meant nothing if they were handed to corporate rock bands pretending to be rebels. Crew members recall Smith leaving rooms whenever U2 songs were played, a silent protest against what he believed was spectacle over substance. 1. Depeche Mode finally taking the number 1 spot as the most explosive feud of Robert Smith's career, his bitter rivalry with Depeche Mode. What makes this conflict so shocking is that The Cure and Depeche Mode began as friends in the early 1980s underground scene, but their relationship soured as Depeche Mode embraced synthesizers and electronic instrumentation. Smith allegedly viewed their shift as a personal betrayal, believing that Dave Gahan and company were destroying the soul of alternative rock by killing real emotion with machines. Studio insiders recall Smith storming out of sessions whenever Depeche Mode was mentioned. The tension peaked during a European festival tour in the mid-1980s when witnesses claimed Smith and Gahan engaged in a heated backstage argument over the future of music. Smith accused Depeche Mode of abandoning authenticity, while Gahan shot back that The Cure were stuck in the past. From that point on, the hostility became public. Smith reportedly refused photo opportunities if Depeche Mode were nearby, and tour managers had to stagger arrival times to keep the bands apart. Industry veterans say Smith saw Depeche Mode's global success as a direct threat to everything he believed music should stand for.
Please don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon.